There are moments in life when privilege feels like protection, and moments when it feels like a trap. This story begins in such a place, quiet, polished, and carefully arranged. A place where comfort is assumed, where futures appear already decided, and where nothing seems urgent enough to question. On the surface, everything looks safe, controlled, almost innocent. But beneath that calm order, something restless waits. Here youth moves freely, untouched by consequence, or so it believes. Rules exist, but they feel distant. Boundaries are present, but they are rarely tested. Desire drifts quietly through hallways and late-night conversations, unnamed, unexamined, and dangerously unchallenged. What begins as curiosity soon presses closer, asking questions no one feels prepared to answer. This is not a world shaped by struggle, it is shaped by comfort, and comfort has a way of dulling caution. A single choice, made without reflection, begins to alter the balance. What was once harmless becomes uncertain. What felt private begins to reach outward. Friendship, loyalty, and trust are placed under pressure, not through violence, but through intimacy, through silence, through the slow realization that some lines once crossed cannot be easily redrawn. The film watches patiently. It does not judge. It does not warn. It allows moments to unfold naturally, knowing that tension grows strongest when it is not announced. Faces reveal more than words. Pauses carry weight. And behind every smile, a question lingers. How well do we truly understand the consequences of our desires? This is a story about youth standing at the edge of awareness, about how innocence can coexist with recklessness, about how a single moment can fracture certainty without ever raising its voice. Nothing here explodes, nothing demands attention, and yet something is already slipping out of control. Jonathan "Johnny" Atkins, played by Andrew McCarthy. Jonathan is a young man raised in comfort and privilege. He moves through life with ease, shaped by wealth rather than struggle. His character represents innocence mixed with entitlement, not cruel, but unaware of how fragile boundaries can be. Jonathan does not seek harm. Instead, he drifts into it through curiosity and emotional blindness. His journey is less about action and more about realization. Skip Burroughs, played by Rob Lowe. Skip is Jonathan's close friend, energetic, impulsive, and emotionally restless. Where Jonathan hesitates, Skip moves forward. He is driven by desire, confidence, and a sense that rules are flexible suggestions rather than limits. Skip brings motion into the story. His charm masks recklessness, and his choices push the narrative into uncomfortable territory without fully understanding the cost. Ellen Atkins, played by Jacqueline Bisset. Ellen is Jonathan's mother, composed, elegant, and emotionally reserved. She represents adulthood viewed from a distance, someone confident in appearance, yet quietly vulnerable beneath it. Her presence introduces complexity and unspoken tension. She is not written as a symbol, but as a human figure whose loneliness and openness shape critical moments in the story. Susan Atwell, played by Virginia Madsen. Susan is thoughtful, observant, and grounded. She exists slightly apart from the world of excess and privilege, offering contrast and emotional clarity. Her role highlights consequences, what it means to care, to reflect, and to see beyond impulse. Susan's presence adds moral weight without moralizing. The story begins at a prestigious boys' boarding school, a place shaped by privilege, routine, and quiet confidence. Jonathan "Johnny" Atkins arrives as a new student, polite, reserved, and still adjusting to the rhythm of this protected world. He quickly befriends Skip Burroughs, a charismatic and impulsive student who moves through life with ease and appetite. Skip introduces Jonathan to a world beyond school rules, parties, freedom, and desire, treating adulthood as something to sample rather than understand. During a school break, Skip invites Jonathan to stay at his home in Chicago. There, Jonathan is introduced to Ellen Atkins, his friend's mother. Ellen is elegant, lonely, and living in a comfortable but emotionally distant world. Jonathan is immediately struck by her presence. What begins as admiration slowly turns into intimacy. Ellen, equally isolated, allows the connection to grow, ignoring the consequences that linger just beyond the moment. When Jonathan returns to school, he carries the secret with him, unaware that Skip has begun a relationship with Susan Atwell, a thoughtful young woman Jonathan knows and respects. The balance between friendship and secrecy tightens. Jonathan struggles with guilt and confusion, sensing that something is wrong but lacking the maturity to confront it. The tension escalates when Skip unknowingly brings Susan to his home, where Ellen and Jonathan's past connection begins to surface. Hints, glances, and unease reveal that the boundaries crossed earlier cannot remain hidden. Eventually, the truth emerges. Skip discovers that his closest friend has been involved with his mother. The revelation fractures their friendship. Skip reacts with anger and betrayal, while Jonathan is forced to confront the weight of his actions. What once felt private and contained now ripples outward, affecting everyone involved. Ellen, faced with the reality of her choices, withdraws, burdened by regret and the collapse of her carefully controlled life. The story moves toward resolution through confrontation rather than punishment. Jonathan and Skip face each other not as carefree boys, but as young men forced into awareness. Their friendship does not return to what it was, but it does not completely dissolve either. It is reshaped by knowledge, disappointment, and reluctant understanding. In the end, Jonathan leaves school and returns home changed. The experience marks the end of his innocence. Ellen remains behind, her life outwardly unchanged, yet internally altered. Skip moves forward, carrying both resentment and maturity earned too early. The film closes quietly. No lessons are announced. No justice is declared. Class ends as a story about youth encountering consequence, about how privilege can delay understanding, but not prevent it. What begins as curiosity becomes awareness, and what feels like freedom reveals its cost. When Class was released in 1983, it immediately attracted attention not for violence or politics, but for its central relationship and the discomfort it created. The controversy stemmed from the film's willingness to explore intimacy across age, authority, and social boundaries, presented without melodrama or moral commentary. For many audiences at the time, this restraint made the subject feel more unsettling, not less. In the United States, the film was not banned, but it faced strong debate. It received an R rating, which limited younger audiences and shaped its theatrical reach. Some critics praised the film for its seriousness and emotional honesty, while others argued that the premise itself crossed ethical lines, regardless of how quietly it was portrayed. The discussion focused less on legality and more on responsibility, whether the film normalized behavior that should remain unspoken on screen. In several conservative regions, including parts of the American Midwest and South, the film experienced restricted screenings and resistance from theater owners who feared public backlash. Some cinemas chose not to screen it at all, not due to legal pressure, but due to community sensitivity and concern over audience reaction. Internationally, Class faced varied responses. In parts of Europe, the film was shown with age restrictions, but generally accepted within art house and urban theaters. However, in several Asian and Middle Eastern countries, the film was not approved for theatrical release, largely due to censorship rules regarding sexual relationships that challenge family structures or social hierarchy. In many cases, the film was simply denied classification, effectively preventing public screening without an official ban announcement. Television broadcasts, where they occurred, often required edited versions, removing or shortening scenes that implied intimacy. These edits sometimes weaken the emotional logic of the story, as the film relies heavily on implication and quiet buildup, rather than explicit dialogue. Over time, the controversy surrounding Class softened. As audiences revisited the film through a historical lens, discussions shifted from shock to analysis. focusing on how the film portrays privilege, immaturity, and consequence rather than sensational relationships. Today, the film is more often discussed as a coming-of-age drama shaped by discomfort rather than a provocation designed to offend. The controversy did not destroy the film's reputation. Instead, it fixed it in a particular place in cinema history, as a work that trusted stillness and restraint, and in doing so, asked audiences to confront their own boundaries rather than be guided by the film itself. For the actors, Class arrived at a critical moment, shaping how each would be seen during the decade. Andrew McCarthy, portraying Jonathan Atkins, became closely associated with characters defined by introspection and emotional sensitivity. This role reinforced his image as a thoughtful presence rather than a loud protagonist, an identity that later carried into other defining films of the 1980s. Class positioned him as an actor capable of carrying moral uncertainty without exaggeration. Rob Lowe, playing Skip Burroughs, benefited differently. His performance emphasized charm, energy, and recklessness, qualities that would become central to his early career. The film strengthened his status as a symbol of youthful confidence in 1980s cinema, while also hinting at a darker undercurrent beneath that charm. Skip was not merely carefree, he was impulsive and emotionally unprepared, a combination that resonated strongly with audiences of the era. For Jacqueline Bisset, the film marked a shift in perception. Already established, she stepped into a role defined by restraint, loneliness, and vulnerability rather than glamour. Her performance was widely discussed for its maturity and quiet complexity, reinforcing her reputation as an actor willing to engage with uncomfortable emotional terrain. Virginia Madsen, in a quieter role, gained recognition for her natural presence and emotional grounding. Though her part was smaller, it contributed to her later casting as a figure of sincerity and depth. Beyond individual careers, Class reflected a broader movement in 1980s American cinema. While the decade is often remembered for excess, spectacle, and optimism, the film belonged to a parallel stream, one interested in emotional consequence, privilege, and moral ambiguity. It explored youth not as carefree fantasy, but as a stage where choices begin to carry weight. The film also demonstrated that mainstream studios could support stories that were intimate, restrained, and uncomfortable without relying on sensational framing. Its success encouraged similar dramas that treated adolescence and early adulthood with seriousness rather than nostalgia. In retrospect, Class stands as a reminder that 1980s cinema was not singular in tone. Alongside escapism, there existed films willing to slow down, observe, and allow discomfort to speak. Its legacy lies not in imitation, but in its quiet insistence that coming-of-age stories could be thoughtful, restrained, and emotionally honest. When the last images fade, Class does not rush to explain itself. It leaves behind a quiet discomfort, the kind that asks for reflection rather than reaction. What remains is not a lesson, but an awareness that youth, when sheltered by privilege, often mistakes freedom for safety and curiosity for consequence. The film lingers in the space between innocence and experience, where choices are made without full understanding, yet still carry weight. Friendships are altered, trust is tested, and adulthood arrives not with clarity, but with recognition. Some moments cannot be undone. Some knowledge cannot be returned. Class belongs to a corner of cinema that trusted stillness. It allowed silence to speak, and restraint to reveal more than spectacle ever could. In doing so, it captured something lasting, a portrait of transition, fragile and unsettling, that continues to resonate long after its time. If you choose to return to stories like this, stories that observe rather than instruct, that allow discomfort to breathe, then stay with us. Subscribe, not for noise, but for cinema that respects your attention, for films that do not close a chapter, but leave it slightly open.